What if the biggest thing holding you back isn't the world around you, but the way you see yourself? Self acceptance isn't about giving up or settling, it's about embracing who you are so you can step fully into your potential. Today, we're exploring how to do just that. My name's Michael Perry, and this is the new Ashla Podcast. So, what is self acceptance? Self acceptance is accepting yourself where you're at, accepting all your flaws and all your strengths, accepting where you're at in life and all the struggles that are associated with that. So, when we look at self acceptance, especially when we are on the path of self improvement, we must create a dichotomy between the two because these are two very separate things, but they also work hand in hand. When we are in the face of self improvement, it is easy to get caught up in trying to shoot for a goalpost of where we want to be in life. But when we do that and we don't take the time to reflect and appreciate where we are at, it's so easy to get lost in the weeds and feel defeated. Think of a time in your life where you accomplished a goal or you were setting out for it. Think about what it took to get there. Think about the journey. Because when it comes to any adventure in life, the journey is the most important part and not the destination. When we look at ourselves and all the things we want to do, it's important that we see where we are at in this moment. One of the things I'd like to touch on with this is there's been a new scientific finding on a part of our brains called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. Now, this part of our brains is literally the source of willpower. Now, if you're out there and you're stuck in a situation in your life, you want to get momentum, you keep wanting to accomplish these goals, and you keep finding yourself back at square one, this might be your issue. Willpower is not something you are born with. It is not something that just happens upon you. It's not a spring of inspiration and all of a sudden you can tackle on all the steps. Willpower is cultivated. Now, this part of our brains, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, the way it works is whenever we do something that we don't want to do, something that is difficult, the more difficult, the better. The more this part of our brain expands as we do it, because we are cultivating willpower in the face of adversity. Why is this important? Because many of us who are stuck need to meet ourselves where we're at, as I said earlier. And when we do that, we begin to cultivate true inner strength and the ability to handle more and more tasks, but it all starts with the first step. Now, getting back to self-acceptance. Self-acceptance is one of the hardest parts of this journey because the more you dive into understanding yourself, the more you begin to see your flaws. And when we do this, it is important to go through this with grace and compassion and non-judgment. None of this work is to persecute you or to make you feel lesser than, but to empower you, to make you understand where you are at in life so that you can start taking steps to break the patterns that have held you stuck your whole life. Now, an important part with self-acceptance is accepting yourself does not mean staying the same person. In fact, it's impossible to do so, and if you do, you're really going to feel stuck. When we go through life and hardships fall upon us, when we're pushed into a corner and we have to fight to rebuild ourselves, to start from the ground up, life is a rebirthing of 1,000 deaths. We are constantly evolving, changing, growing. And depending on what we go through and how we take it, we can either get bitter or we can get better. And that's why self-acceptance is so important, is because if you can humble yourself to love yourself, to accept yourself where you're at and love yourself anyway, the easier this process will be because you will feel an internal pull to live your best life even in hardship. There is so much self-loathing out there because so many people hold themselves to an unrealistic standard of accomplishments, of material possessions, to a version of themselves that even in their best days they could not reach. It's one of the issues with television and media. We see these heroes, we see these stars, and we want to be just like them, but we can't. We are not perfect. We are all flawed, and I mean that in such a beautiful way, because when we are put into a situation where we're triggered, where we're upset, where we're angry, we're not going to act from our highest self in those moments because our nervous system has taken full control over us. So it's important to truly learn to accept these moments so that we can work through them, to give yourself the grace and compassion and not judge yourself too harshly for the moments where you just did what you thought was best in that moment. Now, when we start to develop self compassion, self acceptance, we must understand the role of the inner critic and how to soften its voice. If you're someone where your mind is constantly tearing you down, whether that's body image issues or not being happy with where you're at in life, this is a part of your innate survival instincts. We look back at our ancestors hundreds and hundreds of years ago, if not thousands, and their main survival needs were to find food, water, and shelter. But we live in an age where that's much more readily accessible. So where does our survival instincts go from there? As we evolve as people, the new form of survival needs are interpersonal needs. We want to feel validated. We want to feel accepted. We want to feel respected. And often we look externally to cultivate these things. And that's one of the greatest flaws of the mentality of Western civilization. When we look outside ourselves to fulfill these needs, we will constantly be chasing control. When we chase these things, we begin to develop masks that we use to move forward in life. These masks are the things we use to get those needs met: validation, love, acceptance. But the more we curate to these masks, the more inauthentic we become. And the more inauthentic we are, the more we will struggle with our own mental health and self-esteem. Because self-esteem lies in truly being authentic and who you were meant to be, including all those emotions you have and being able to express them wholeheartedly. I spent most of my life playing the role of a hero, and I would shove my needs down and do all I could to make sure the people around me were taken care of. And in doing that, I would lose myself. I would never stand up for myself. It would chip away at my self-worth because I put others' needs above my own, and I'm sure this resonates with a lot of you out there. So what we need to do to cultivate this self-acceptance is we need to learn how to get these needs met on an internal level. We need to learn how to fulfill our own needs. And it all starts with self-acceptance. Now, self-love is something that is easier said than done. I can tell you, give yourself affirmations, tell yourself you love yourself every day. And yes, this might help over time, but you must truly learn to start believing it. And this does take time and patience. So that is the key to starting to take that inner critic and lessen its grip on how you show up in the world. Now, the inner critic is the amalgamation of our unconscious mind, the 95% of our thoughts we have on a daily basis. The unconscious mind, think of it as our minds are an operating system that we turn on every day and go through life operating programs and automated systems that help us do what we need to. Well, as we go through life and we go through hardship, we go through suffering and struggle, we begin developing viruses in this computer system because when we create maladaptive coping mechanisms for these moments in our lives, they become a part of us. They become a part of this mask. And this is not to criticize these parts because these parts exist because at one point they were what you needed to be safe. But as you grow and become stronger, you need to release these parts. And again, this is not with judgment. This is with love and compassion because again, they are what kept you safe when you needed them. But through cultivating awareness, you can start understanding how these parts operate and where they come from. That's one of the big points of shadow work, which again, we will get to another episode. And the more we can begin to understand these parts, the more we can in turn start to teach them that we can take it from here. And this takes time. This takes practice. Again, this journey is 20% awareness, 80% work. So once we become aware and we're in a situation where that part is triggered, I used to be someone who would go quiet if conflict would be going on. And when I would shut down, it would be how I was able to emotionally detach from the conflict and feel safe. Now that I'm at this point, when I am in a situation where there's conflict, and those parts of my brain begin to shut down to put me into freeze or flight mode, I start working on breath work. I start regulating my nervous system, calming myself down, bringing my heart rate down. And in doing so, I can then approach this conflict from a clear state of mind and be able to voice my opinions, my needs, and my concerns. So the more we do this, the more we can train these parts out of our system and start working on this faulty programming we've been operating from. And this helps us also start replacing self judgment with self kindness. Because the more we can be kind to ourselves, the more our souls will meet us in the middle. If you're someone who is stuck and feels like life is a hamster wheel and you keep being drawn back to square one, I guarantee you have issues with self trust. And self trust is more than just showing up for yourself, it's respecting yourself and loving yourself where you're at. And when we're in that state, it's about not setting these major goals of climbing Mount Everest. It's about looking at the steps in front of you, taking those steps and celebrating those successes. To love yourself for the little things. There was an interview with Jordan Peterson I heard a while back, and it was a beautiful interview that started off a little weird. So I think it was Joe Rogan who was interviewing him, and he was telling him, when you have a kid, you gotta lower the bar. And Joe's like, why would you lower the bar for your child? And he's like, if you have a kid who's getting poor grades in school and you tell him you need to become an A student, that kid will not only struggle to meet those goals, but he will then judge himself and criticize himself for not being intelligent enough to do so. So you got to lower the bar. If your kid's getting D's in school, let the next step be C's in school. Start working with them with where they're at, because when you lower the bar to a point where you can reach it and you can pull yourself above it, you will feel success. You will feel joy for your accomplishments, because it's in the accomplishments where we set an expectation and we accomplish it do we start cultivating true self-trust. And in a lot of these situations where you do set the bar too high and you're losing that self-trust, you start creating negative belief systems. I was in special ed through school. I struggled to pull myself through it. And I would just tell myself, I'm not smart enough to do this. I'm just stupid. I guess this is just how I am. And it wasn't until years later, after quitting all those medications and developing myself as a person, that I got back into college, and now I'm in the honor roll. And it's because I removed those limiting beliefs and actually applied myself to do what I wanted to do. And it took time. I didn't start off great in school, but as I did it more and I saw that I could do more, as I was beginning to validate the work I was putting through, my soul was more excited to pursue the work. And as I did that, I got better and better with it. So when we cultivate this self-trust, when we cultivate self-acceptance, we got to meet ourselves where we are at. And this also ties into learning to validate ourselves, learning to give ourselves the needs we have sought to have filled by others. Self-love. And the more we can meet ourselves there, the more you can accept your current reality without shame or resistance. Because in my opinion, shame is one of the most rampant emotions out there. And we run like hell from it, to the point we shove it down and shove it down. And when we do, we end up building more upon that mask that we try to present to the world, because we don't want to be seen as shameful or inadequate. Shame is not a bad emotion. Shame can tell us when we do something wrong. But when we go through life, shame can become a driving force if we don't keep it in check and give ourselves self-compassion. I read this book a while back that I recommend for anyone who suffers with addiction or with really bad self-esteem issues, and it's called Healing the Shame That Binds You. And it talks about how every emotion you have negatively, like anger, like guilt, jealousy, there's always a sub-emotion with it, and it's shame. We feel angry, and then we feel shameful for being angry, and then we get angrier. And most of the time when we have these extreme emotions, it's not because of what is going on in our lives. It is because of what has happened in the past and how we had to survive through it. Another interview I listened to a while back, and it was beautiful, and this guy was talking about his relationship with his wife and how amazing their communication is. And this is something I apply with my own relationship. If there's tension going on and the emotions are high, we know that the emotions aren't about that event. So we'll sit there and we'll talk about, where is this emotion coming from? What event in our lives, each one of us, depending who has the emotion, started, where did this emotion come from? What caused this emotion? How can we work through and feel this emotion so we can process it and let it have less power over us the next time we feel it? And that's really the key with self-awareness and self-acceptance, is the more you do this, the more these emotions will not control you. And the beauty with self-acceptance is the more we go through it, the more it fuels our motivation rather than diminishes it. Motivation is something that, as I brought up earlier with the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, motivation stems from self-trust, and it stems from showing up for ourselves consistently. And again, if you need to start small and don't judge yourself for it, because I promise you, if you want to hit the gym, go to the gym. Just drive to the gym. Stand outside of it. The next day, go inside. Look at the place. Do that for the first week. Then the next week, go and exercise for 15 minutes. Meet yourself where you're at and start cultivating the habits you want instead of demanding them of yourself. Because every time you do, you lose a little more self-trust and self-respect. And above all, you need to have patience with yourself. Patience is so important in this path, because patience is what helps us develop our character traits, to cultivate the person we want to become. There's a Stoic quote that touches upon this. Nothing important comes into being overnight. Even grapes and figs need time to ripen. If you say you want a fig now, I will tell you, be patient. First, you must allow the tree to flower, then put forth fruit. Then you have to wait until the fruit is ripe. Nothing in life is built overnight, and if you try to do so, it will crash and burn. Because the more we try to compensate, the more we try to live inauthentically, the more it's not real, the more it is a falsity that you are trying to portray to feel better about yourself or be presented as better than to others. This is not a race. This is not something that we need to compete with others. The only person we should be competing with is ourselves. There's an amazing book called Atomic Habits, and it's one of the most renowned books for helping people cultivate good habits. And it talks about real habit change doesn't come from the big habit changes where you're like, I'm going to do this now and I'm going to quit smoking today. I'm going to start working out every day. I'm going to start this business. No, real change happens in small incremental measures, 1-2% a day. You look at a plane when it goes to fly. All that pilot needs to do is adjust the plane's flight by 1 degree, and it's going to land in a completely different location. So don't try to make these big changes, these big jumps at once. Meet yourself where you're at and do little pivots. I promise that is where the magic happens. And while you go through this, it is important to give yourself grace. You have to release perfectionism and embrace imperfection. The more we try to do everything perfectly, the more we end up doing nothing. The best work done is the work that is acted upon and not perfected. If you want to start podcasting like we're doing, you can hear we're getting better with every episode, but we are by no means perfect at podcasting. Action is the most important step in all of this. And the more action you can take, the more it will work itself out. You look at someone who learns how to play a guitar. They pick up that guitar and they don't just magically know how to play the strings, how to strum, how to make the music happen. No, it is cultivated with hours and hours of practice and allowing themselves to not be great at it at first. But the more they practice, the better they get. They say it takes 10,000 hours to truly perfect a skill. And I truly believe that. But if you were to practice something just for a month, you are already going to be ahead of 50% of the people who have tried this, because a lot of people jump into something, they realize all the work that's involved, and they jump out. And the more time you dedicate to it, the more patience you have with the process and yourself, the better you're going to become in all things you try to accomplish. One important thing to do is to start practicing daily affirmations of you are enough. I know that was one of my biggest roots of my self-hatred I had for many years, is I never thought I was enough. All my goals were to feel like I was enough. I wanted to be seen. I wanted people to see I care and that I would do the work. But I always wanted to just get to that finish line. And if you tell yourself in the moment, you start giving yourself self-compassion, you start letting yourself know that you are enough, the more you can slowly start to cultivate the belief that you are enough. Because I promise, I don't care who you are, who's listening to this, where you're at in life, whether you're on the streets or you're struggling with major issues in life, you are enough in this moment. You are still going, which is beautiful. And the more you can accept yourself where you are at in this moment, the greater you can then begin to cultivate the traits you truly want to. And the more you do, the more you start to accept yourself, the more it will have a ripple effect in your life. You will see how your relationships change, how your work will change, how your mental well being will change. The more we start practicing self gratitude and self acceptance, the more we will slowly see our whole lives change around us. Now, some of you may have heard the Hermetic principles, and I'm a firm believer of these are the laws of how the universe works. And one of them is as above, so below. And a great way to depict how our inner worlds are projected onto our real life. Have you ever had someone who you gave a compliment to, or you got a compliment? Hey, that's a nice dress. There's this feeling that, I mean, it goes one way or another. All right. It'll either be, hey, thank you for the compliment. I really like it too. But someone who is in a place of self criticism and self hatred will hear, hey, nice dress. And they're going to be like, yeah, make fun of me for my dress. I see how it is. And they're going to completely blow off the compliment because they took it as an attack because that's how they treat themselves. So, as above, so below. The more you change your inner world, the more you change your outer world. Because I promise you, real change does not happen outside of you, it happens within. And when you start accepting yourself more, you start developing self trust, you're going to be much more effective at decision making. You'll be better at emotional resilience. You'll be better at being able to deal with indecision. And that was one of the hardest ones for me growing up my whole life. I always struggled with indecision. Is this the right choice? Is it the wrong choice? Should I do this? Should I not? And the more I've learned to trust myself, the more I've learned to show up for myself through that, the more I've been able to say, this is what I believe is the right choice. I'm going to do this. If it's wrong, then I guess I'm going to learn. Because I believe every path in life, you're either going to learn a little or you're going to live a little. And the peace that comes from that and no longer fighting against yourself opens up so much more space for you to do more in your life. Because so often when we are lost in our heads, when we are isolated, it is a war with ourselves constantly. And the more we can make peace with ourselves and stop fighting ourselves, the more we create space and energy to take on the things in life that we're truly passionate about. And the beauty of this is the more you learn to accept yourself, the more you learn to put yourself out there and trust yourself, the more you learn to change your inner state, the more the world's going to meet you in the middle. If you're struggling with purpose right now, you're probably struggling with this. And when you start to trust yourself, your purpose will slowly come into picture. It'll come into view because you'll start taking actions that are aligned with your own worth, with your own value. You will start cultivating it from an inner space where you are the only validation you need in life. All right, Socrates. He had 3 profound teachings in his life. The first was an unexamined life is not worth living, which I truly believe. That's the work we're talking about. The more we examine our life, the more we can stop living on autopilot and having external forces pull us one way or another, but develop that internal locus of control. His second greatest teaching was the most important task in life is caring for the soul, which is also what we're talking about here. The more you care for your soul, the more you care about your needs and validating your existence, the more fulfilled and more abundant your life will become. And abundance isn't material goods or financial freedom. Abundance is feeling fulfilled in life and having all you need to be happy and content in life. His last teaching, a good person cannot be harmed by others. And it doesn't mean a morally strong person, but exactly what we're talking about. Someone who knows, who has developed the self-trust and self-love and self-acceptance to know they are a good person on the inside, will not be fazed by the opinions of others. And this is also changing work from an external locus of control to an internal locus of control. Because the more we do cultivate that self-love, the more we don't need anyone else to validate our existence because we are validating it ourselves. So I have an exercise for you today. I want you to write down what are the things I am constantly saying that are negative to myself. What are the areas where I struggle to gain momentum? These are 2 separate things. Now, look at these things and begin to pick them apart. What is stopping me? What is the part of me that is holding me back? If it's starting a business and it's fear, then dig into what is the fear. Is it fear of being a failure? Is it fear of being seen as incompetent? Start looking at what that fear is and that part that is trying to keep you safe, because that is what these parts do. They try to keep you safe. After figuring out what that part is, try to dig into that part. Try to talk to that part inside of you. Bring it up. What does it need to feel safe so that you can move forward? How can you show up for it? What are the small steps you can take today to cultivate self-trust? I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope I gave you some good food for thought. And this was the new Ashla Podcast. Ad Lucem.